Hey everybody, it's the Mad Master here. I'm doing a video today about the appalling state of boomer hypocrisy and how it really irritates me in my life and with relatives and with just public, media figures and stuff. And why do I get so triggered by this? I don't know, but it's something that should be addressed and brought up to people, because the whole thing is just like, okay, well, and they're getting kind of old now, the boomers and stuff, but it should be brought up and it should be exposed and talked about, because these people were the ones, people's parents in my case, and people's grandparents. This is a generation that was supposed to change things, supposed to call out the establishment, supposed to, have a revolution, and, but when they say things that are brazenly hypocritical or contradictory to what they believed before, without making themselves accountable, or or saying, oh, this is why my beliefs evolved, without explaining things, it just makes them look really stupid and selfish. And I'm speaking of, it can go a lot of different ways. So, for example, I have a relative who protested the Vietnam War, and he went to basically the big one in Chicago, the Chicago 8, the trial with Abby Hoffman. He was in some of those protests. So in recent years, he has told me that, and I don't know if he was like a little bit buzzed on alcohol or whatever when he said this remark, but this is a really silly thing that he said. He's like, well, I just went to those protests to get laid and get pussy. And I'm like, so you didn't have, and I should have pushed him on this, on this point. So what he was saying basically is, this is just kind of the implication of him saying this, is that he went to this protest and he was doing all this stuff just to get laid. And it's like, so that makes you the ultimate poser, the ultimate pretender in these discussions. That makes you a fucking just purely evil in a certain way. Because at least, the right wingers, a lot of them that are, they're either, they're grifters, a lot of them, but, at least they believe what they're saying. But you live this lifestyle, you're reducing it to this one urge that you have. It's like, oh, you wanted to be cool and protest the war. Even, does that mean does that mean you believed in the war and you were just posing? You thought hippie chicks were hot? Is that what you were saying? Is that what you're saying? It's one of the fucking dumbest things I've ever heard in my life, and I should have pressed back. It was the dumbest thing I ever heard. And not as dumb as this other boomer, well, almost as dumb as this other boomer, what I'm about to say too. And you hear this from that generation. You hear these types of things now. That a lot of them are still Democrats, and they support the same basically the same establishment, not the Republicans. They're really evil. But the thing is that when they attacked the Democrats back in the 60s, George McGovern was the Bernie of the time, the 60s, the early 70s. And they were attacking the Democrats just as hard, if not harder sometimes. Because it's like the Democrats were, as now, the party that were expected to be more benevolent and more compassionate and stuff like that. Republicans are just like, oh yeah, they're just crazy, evil, blah, blah, blah. They're selfish. It's just like expected, but it's not expected. That's why they attacked harder, in the Chicago, the Democratic convention and all that, what was going on. So because they weren't, that was the whole thing, was that they were just as bad in many ways as the Republicans were, but they weren't as out in the open about it. So it was a deception. So they wanted to expose this deception. This is my whole fucking political career, is exposing that deception that's going on. So that was one thing that he reduced it to, just wanting to satisfy his sexual urges. And that's just so like callous and contradictory to the whole premise of why you would want to participate in those types of protests. Do I believe him? That's the question. Do I believe him? I believe he's deluding himself and using mental gymnastics to excuse his current beliefs about foreign policy or whatever, or something else, or his, lives in a very establishment, actually right-wing community now. Maybe he's trying to like place his mind in the direction, I don't know, or maybe it was just an offhand joke. I don't know. I don't think someone would joke about that. That's really dumb. The second example of this is something that probably can be expected from this person. And that's, and by the way, this person, I really do like their music. I like a lot of their classic material, and I like their previous band that they were in. That is Ted Nugent, of course. So I read once that in the 90s, Ted Nugent was asked about the first Amboy Dukes full-length album cover that has a bunch of pot pipes on it. And he's like, I don't know what those pipes were for. I don't know. And it's like, either you're so dumb that you don't know what a pot pipe or a bong looks like, or you're just kind of making an excuse for yourself going along with that. I am sure, being in a psychedelic garage band in the 60s, that you fucking smoked pot at one time or another. I don't buy it at all. I mean, Kiss were kind of just, grifting on that whole thing, of course. But so I believe that Gene Simmons never did drugs. Paul Stanley did do drugs by his own admission. But, I do believe that Gene Simmons may not have used that many drugs, if at all. So, but Ted Nugent was deeply involved in that. And I don't believe Ted Nugent was like I said, like with, what's the band before Kiss? They kind of have a little psychedelic things to them. But I don't believe that the Amboy Dukes were some type of operation just to get famous, or to get like, to go to the top of the pops to get laid or whatever. Like somewhat the band before, the Proto Kiss band were closer to that than Amboy Dukes, even if they weren't purely that either. So when you read this quote from Ted Nugent about the pot pipes, and I'm going to go into something else even almost worse about Ted Nugent with this whole thing. You're like, man, that's so dumb and so ignorant and like naive. And like, if you lived back then, I'm sure when he was what did he do at band practice? They were probably smoking pot all the time. They have the first Amboy Dukes cover had pot pipes on the fucking cover. I mean, how much more obvious can you get? You think they were just like, oh, they just put that on the cover. And that's how he was acting. Like, oh, it's just a cover. I don't know what that was about. And then the other thing that really bothered me about Ted Nugent was when he said Journey to the Center of the Mind, he thought it was just like it was like a self-help, self-empowerment song. And like, even though it was obviously about tripping on acid. I mean, it could be interpreted both ways, obviously, but it's like the guy is deluding himself to be in denial that he was part of this movement. He was part of this culture that he was so entangled in. I mean, the Amboy Dukes are on the Nuggets compilation. We all know that was the psychedelic garage compilation of the 70s that Lenny Kaye put together. I think it was Lenny Kaye put together, and then influenced all these like New York bands and the Stooges. You know, not the Stooges, but you know, because Stooges were kind of part of that too. But all these bands that became punk. You know, all these psychedelic bands. They were all, you know, some of them they weren't tripping balls on acid all the time. But it's so stupid, and it's so hypocritical and delusional to posit yourself as this person that was never involved with these things and never believed these ideas, and they were just doing it to get laid, or you know, it kind of, I mean, I'm sure there's some boomer. Nugent probably said the same thing too at some point, like, oh yeah, I was just in there to get laid, you know, I didn't really care about the psychedelics, I just thought the girls were cute with their bell bottoms, oh, you know. I mean, what the fuck is wrong with these people? And I'm not gonna lie and be a hypocrite about what I've been into. I'll admit that I was into this or that at one point. Like for example, I admit I was into Alex Jones. You know, at one point I listened to his show every day for a while when I was on an unemployment. You know, I was really fucking into Alex Jones at one point. I've been into stuff. You know, there's things I've been into. I was once sort of going communist for real. Like I was into Fidel Castro. I bought a book about him. I was like, oh, Fidel seems like he was a good guy. Like the United States just did bad shit to him. I may think that's partially true too, but I mean, I don't think he was really a good guy. But I'm just saying, the United States did use that as like a pretext for all this bad shit. But that said, I'm not a communist, and I'm not, you know, pro-communism, and I'm not pro, what was the other thing? I'm not into InfoWars, you know, anymore. But I'll admit why I was into it and what happened to me, the evolution and how I evolved out of it, and what I believe now and what is wrong about it. I'll provide nuance about my beliefs versus my former beliefs. When people say, I was just in the Vietnam protests to get laid. Where's the nuance? Where's the detail? Where's the intelligence? I give people too much fucking credit for thinking they're smarter than they are. And that bothers me, really bothers me. If anything triggers me more than anything, it's me thinking someone is smarter, more nuanced, and more articulate than they are. That's about all.